Therefore, it's very important to note that every vote that you cast will either break or make peace. Said that he can only assent to it after next year's elections, adding that if conduct of the freest and most credible election in Nigeria, called on the people of Owu to participate in politics in order to contribute more to the national development. Four political parties have presented candidates below the mandatory age of 35 years for the 2019 presidential elections. This was revealed by the National Commissioner of INEC, Antonia Okosi-Simbine. Although she did not reveal the identities of the parties, it has been gathered that they have violated the law and might be disqualified by the Independent National Electoral Commission. Mrs. Okosi-Simbine explained why there are so many political parties, saying that the Commission did not want to disqualify people from participating in the electoral process. And according to her, the number of political parties and candidates would determine the nature and size of ballot papers. Sources close to the party also said that the Oshomole-led committee was constrained by the disposition of President Muhammadu Buhari to each other in the APC primaries, and that Mr. Sanwo-Olu emerged as winner. As regards Mr. Ambode, the governorship candidate stated that they are members of the same political family, building a strong coalition and formidable force that will deliver victory to the party in the upcoming elections in Lagos. Concerning his main opponent, Mr. Jimmy Agbaje of the People's Democratic Party, he said he respects Mr. Agbaje, but that on the political landscape, their pedigrees and experiences are not the same, as he holds more public service experience, effective representation, and credentials. I spoke with Mr. Olukayode Awokoya of the Abundant Nigeria Renewal Party, ANRP. He is the Etiosa Federal Constituency candidate for the party in the House of Representatives. We spoke about his ambition and plans for Etiosa constituency and also other issues concerning Lagos State and politics in general. Thank you very much for joining us on Politics with GA, Mr. Olukayode Awokoya.
Thank you very much, being a good day.
What's your take on President Buhari's refusal to assent the Electoral Amendment Act bill for the fourth time? His excuse is that it's too close to elections and might disrupt it.
Well, it's unfortunate that something that is meant for the good of the country always ends up being politicized. Not since learned from the existing law, the pitfalls.
And previous elections, yes.
Yes, so meant to address some of the pitfalls to give us a better election. So I certainly, it's going to be an argument, but I think the proposed act has more of good than bad for the country.
The Senate will sit in plenary tomorrow and probably debate this as to whether to override the assent. Do you think if they have the power to override it, they should go ahead, or it might be too dicey, knowing the kind of volatile political environment we live in?
Well, they have the constitutional powers to override it, so, but their need to go ahead will probably depend on if they can muster the necessary votes. So I'm sure they will do that before they attempt to override it. It might not be nice politically to attempt to override and lose the votes, but I think they have the powers, they have the rights, and I will support an override in the interest of the nation.
Now let's bring things back home. You're an indigenous of Lagos citizens. What is really happening and what can be done to arrest the situation? I'm sure this is not the Lagos of your dream.
Well, even before he lost his primary, Lagos State was already in filth. Lagos State was not working for all. Lagos State has so much potential to grow the economy of the nation. So I believe what needs to be done is for people to just be accountable for those who put them in office and not accountable to themselves. So in every sphere of governance, if it's road transportation, if it's healthcare, if it's security, Lagos State has the resources, the wherewithal, housing, to do what is good and what is very value-adding to the citizens. But the question is, are those in authority, is their desire to do the good for the general people or the good for a few?
But the people have almost resigned to their fate, and they see spending 3 hours in traffic on their commute to work and back from work every day as a normal occurrence in life, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Well, when you're not only doing electoral cycles, at all times, actually, the problem with citizens I see in Nigeria is they see that call of accountability as once in 4 years. They don't even want to stay out and devote one day. However, the smart politicians have found that out, and they know that after one day, they'll just go back to the slumber. So citizens should demand accountability. There's no room for an independent candidate, and that was why, together with Like Minds, we started a party like 2 years ago. And this party is made up of professionals, well-meaning Nigerians, young and old, but mainly people who, in their own little way, renew the country. To go back to even things that
Have politics of ideology, that everybody is just there to, it's a means.
it is not a mistake that the top 5, 6 companies in the whole world that ideology of renewal, renaissance, and respect in the country. We want to renew the country back in spite of their achievements, in the global scene. The respect is not there. So that's our ideology, and time is going to tell whether we don't have public schools, either primary or secondary. There are very few. We don't have public hospitals. But by way of priority, my priority is largely in the area of healthcare and things that are associated
You left it this late, and your excuse is it's time to do something.
Yes.
Why should the people trust you? I mean, politicians have come to them in the past and promised heaven and earth, and didn't deliver on their promises. So why should the people of Etiosa trust that you have their best interest this time around?
Oh, several reasons. I'll start from, on those common projects that have won the election. So we'll call that has been wrong. We need to redo the act a bit, wherein we need to introduce a health sector fund custodian. You see, there have been issues of late that the funds are not being well managed. But if you look at the pension experience, assets that is growing. By the way, the 9 trillion is bigger than the country.
Elections, just a couple of weeks away. Do you have confidence in INEC being an unbiased empire, and how?
In Lagos, more than 80% of that stay on the island. People who are related with here, who know me and who have seen what I've done, who know what I stand for, there are all many here, and many have been rooting. These are people who have received and seen information and intelligence of how things were probably corrupted in time past. So we want to beg INEC at the highest level, at the higher level, not to compromise itself. We want to appeal to the security agents not to allow thugs to disrupt collation of voting centers, perhaps working in concert with some big parties. We want to call on the electorate within the law, come out and vote and defend your vote under the law. If all these are done, we'll have much more credible elections than we had in 2015. So we don't doubt.
In Kenya, Makadara Member of Parliament George Aladwa has asked Baringo Senator Gideon Moi to declare his presidential ambitions for the 2022 general elections. Mr. Aladwa said this during the Iteso Cultural Festival at Bomas of Kenya in Nairobi, saying that he and others are ready to support him. In his response to this, he said he would come home soon to speak out openly about its plans. He also urged the Iteso community and Busia County to value education and conserve culture. Despite showing interest in the State House race, Senator Moi has not publicly declared his stand, but his allies in Kanu have insisted that he would be on the ballot. The Member of Parliament and Busia Senator Amos Wako advised Mr. Gideon to stay close to Mr. Raila Odinga, former Prime Minister of Kenya, in order to increase his chances of winning the presidency. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, President Joseph Kabila says he would leave office after the 23rd of December elections, but may seek re-election in the future. A 47-year-old Joseph Kabila said he would remain in politics after the poll, as there's still a long journey ahead. He became president of the resource-rich African state in 2001, following the killing of his father, Laurent Kabila. His presidential mandate ended in 2016, but he has stayed in office as elections were repeatedly delayed. Dozens of opposition supporters have been killed in protests demanding that he steps down and elections be held. The Election Commission finally set 23rd of December as the election date, saying it had not been possible to hold the poll earlier because of difficulties in registering voters in a country with poor infrastructure and conflict in the mostly lawless eastern region. That's it on Politics with GA for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Benga Aboroa. The political decisions people make will affect many lives. Many people see politics as the government and the laws being made. While that is true, it's way more complicated than that.
I don't know what type of procedure is this.
Some of you may be aspiring to positions of leadership in the political arena.
And I accepted full responsibility.
But the question is, why do you want to lead?
It has everything to do with you. Every law that is made will impact many. Sometimes the decisions do affect people negatively. Therefore, it's very important to note that every vote that you cast will either break or make people. Politics with GA brings you the latest political news as well as insight and analysis as we discuss the most important issues that matter.
Is it for upcoming artists to blow in Nigeria?
Welcome to Cross Trending. I am looking to remember your and is a battle that must be won. The Nigerian president said he has implemented a lot of strategies to combat corruption, adding that the best way to eliminate the scourge is through prevention. While the People's Democratic Party (PDP) presidential campaign organization has condemned the alleged raid on the Abuja residence of two sons of the party's presidential candidate Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) had reportedly raided the residence of Aliyu and Mustafa Abubakar early on Saturday morning. An action the PDP described as vicious, outrageous, dirty and reprehensible. A statement on Monday by the spokesman for the PDP campaign, Kola Olobondiyon, said the operatives of the EFCC unleashed violence on the home of Atiku's sons, while at the weekend raided the Abuja residences of two sons of People's Democratic Party presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar. The spokesman of the commission, Tony Orilade, who met the denial on Monday, advised journalists to get their facts right before going to press. He recalled that the press had last week reported that the commission froze the account of the PDP vice presidential candidate Peter Obi, a report he said was not true. Mr. Orilade said the EFCC had been on the trail of one of the sons of the former governor of Abia State, Ogonna Orji, through whom he said the father laundered funds belonging to Abia State. He said the commission had laid siege to a nightclub in Abuja where Ogbonna Orji had gone clubbing and only apprehended him around 5 a.m. on Monday morning when he was about entering his vehicle, a Range Rover. Orilade said also apprehended along with Ogbonna was his friend Kelvin Iluna, who was using another car worth about 35 million naira, a car said to be linked to Ogbonna. He wondered why Atiku's sons were linked to the investigation of Theodore Orji's son and appealed to journalists to always cross-check their facts before publication. Well, President of the Senate, Senator Bukola Saraki, and Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Yakubu Dogara, on Monday said vote buying is a threat to the nation's democracy. Speaking at a public hearing in Abuja, they called for urgent action by stakeholders, especially Security. Kwesili has criticized President Muhammadu Buhari for refusing access.
On the president to rethink his approach on this. If President Buhari has nothing to fear, he should simply sign that bill into an act. He fears that he has already lost the election, and he wishes to have an uneven playing field where they can determine all kinds of things about 2019 election. He will be resisted by the Nigerian people.
Well, ahead of the 2019 elections, stakeholders have expressed concern over the state of chaos and insecurity in the nation. This was the focus of the annual lecture held by the Alumni Association of the University of Nigeria. Our correspondent Mary Chinda reports.
It is less than 70 days to Nigeria's general elections. The need for African leaders to be held accountable by the rule of law is the focus of this year's annual lecture held by the University of Nigeria Alumni Association in Lagos.
In law, we lawyers talk about the rule of law. And the rule of law is actually the superstructure that determines what institutions are. The rule of law is the concept that the law is not a respecter of anybody, that the law is there and that all of us are subject to it no matter who you are.
Worry over the state of the nation and President Buhari's refusal to sign the electoral bill into law.
This electoral act is going to help the country. It's going to help us to define how election processes should take place, and which of course will make it almost free and fair in some degree. But if he's not going to sign it, then what are we talking about? It's like he's become a dictator or something.
Our democracy has not produced progress. What we have now, right now in Nigeria, is a criminal capture of political parties.
If you ask me, the ruling party, they've not done
national enterprises, so to say, like the NITEL, NEPA, Nigerian Airways, wouldn't have gone the way they went.
There's a need for the citizens.
Weak. Of course, you know, when we talk of legal institutions, we're talking of law enforcement and the like. The political institutions are still weak, which is why we talk of vote buying and all such nonsense.
And away from that, the federal government on Monday resumed talks with the leaders of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, over the ongoing strike in public universities. The university lecturers have been on strike since November 4, demanding for improved funding of universities and implementation of previous agreements with the government. The ASU delegation, led by its national president, Biodun Oguyemi, arrived at the ministry at exactly 10 minutes past 4 p.m. Also at the meeting was the national president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, NLC, Ayuba Waba. At least 4 other meetings have been held between both parties since the strike began. Well, the United Nations set aside December 10th of every year as World Human Rights Day. With this year's commemoration of the Human Rights Day, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called attention to how far the world has come in the area of regard for basic human rights.
A right to life, a right to democracy, a right to social security, the right to play, the right to food and shelter for all, a right to education, and freedom of expression and freedom of thought. These are some of the human rights engrafted in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations in 1948.
For 70 years, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has been a global beacon, shining a light for dignity, equality and well-being, and bringing hope to dark places. The rights proclaimed in the Declaration apply to everyone, no matter our race, belief, location, or other distinction of any kind. Human rights are universal and eternal. They are also indivisible. One cannot pick and choose among civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights.
And as Nigeria joins the rest of the world to celebrate the 70th year of this milestone of the Human Rights Declaration, a member of the League of Nigerian Journalists, Yakubu Mohammed, who x-rays Nigeria's journey towards the full adherence to the basic human rights, says Nigeria's government has over the years shown little respect for the rights of its citizens.
Today, people don't willingly go to prison anymore. People are not detained just willy-nilly anymore. But then, the fact that the circumstances of our economy, the imperatives of governance, and so on and so forth, have made it difficult for people to enjoy these rights in fullsomeness as they wish it to be. So yes, that we do not have these rights as a matter of right. We don't have them now because people can have 3 square meals in a day. Security agencies have not been up and doing to ensure that these rights are guaranteed in practice. While they are there in theory, you go to bed, you are not sure.
The Festival of Lights by the people of Israel between November and December every year. This celebration commemorates the deliverance of the Jews from their Greek-Syrian oppressors after the attack of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in the 2nd century BC.
Hanukkah is a very interesting miracle because it wasn't a situation where certain times Jewish people were persecuted, the evil people. They didn't want the Jews to practice the Torah. They took over the temple, and what they did was they didn't burn the temple down. They just came around and they knew that to desecrate, to make it no longer useful in the Jewish sense, all they had to do was break the seal. There was a holy seal on each barrel of oil, and they smashed the barrels of oil. And the miracle of Hanukkah was as follows. So when the Jewish people came back to the temple, they were able to find one jug which was untouched and remained pure. Now, this small jug of oil was naturally only able to last for 1 day. I'm sorry.
We also eat a lot of fatty oil fried food to symbolize the miracle of the oil and the lamp. And tonight we are celebrating it this way for the first time in Africa. And we're very happy. This is our way to appreciate Nigeria.
The Jewish community in Nigeria is experiencing significant growth, and the lighting of the menorah brings the Jewish community to limelight.
Jewish community in Nigeria or in Africa is growing, is bubbling. Like this event, Rabbi says, is the first time they are coming up public. That's to show you that over time now, light has succeeded in coming out public. So that's the strength of what light could do, and that is one of the things that encouraged me.
As part of the celebration of oneness and light, members of the Christian community were there to join in this celebration.
Christianity, Judaism, and even Islam all have the same foundations, from our father Abraham down to the patriarchs, and then eventually at the time of Jesus Christ.
The Hanukkah celebration, which is full of love, laughter, music, and oneness, is a clear indication that light always trumps darkness. Susan Jasper, Plus TV Africa.
Well, it's time for a quick break. Do stay tuned for more news when we return. Glad to have you back. European Union prolongs sanctions against President Joseph Kabila's chosen successor, Ramazani Chowdhury, just 2 weeks before a historic election in the DR Congo. This and other African stories in our African News package.
The European Union has prolonged sanctions against Congolese President Joseph Kabila's chosen successor, just 2 weeks before a historic election in the resource-rich Central African country. European Union headquarters said on Monday that travel bans and asset freezes will be renewed for a year against Democratic Republic of Congo's ruling party candidate Emmanuel Ramazani Shadary and 13 other people. Shadary was sanctioned by the European Union last year for obstructing DRC's electoral process and a crackdown against protesters angry over the long-delayed vote. The decision taken by European Union foreign ministers in Brussels could be reviewed in the light of and following the elections scheduled for December 23rd. It could be DRC's first peaceful democratic transfer of power. The decision fears that Kabila, who has ruled since 2001, will assert power behind the scenes if Shadary wins. Somali's MPs, about 100 of them, have backed a motion of no confidence against President Mohamed. Ethiopia's reformist Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was appointed in April. The World Health Organization says Ebola vaccinations will soon begin in South Sudan as the country is at a very high risk in the current outbreak based in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. A statement says South Sudan's health minister will begin vaccinating some health workers and other frontline workers in the capital, Juba, on December 19th. No Ebola cases have been reported in South Sudan or any of the DRC's neighbors in this outbreak, which is now the second deadliest in history. Vaccinations began earlier.
Second life sentence. We'll have details of this and more in our foreign package.
At least one person has been killed and hundreds of thousands left without power supply following a heavy snowstorm that swept through the U.S.'s southeastern states. A state of emergency has been declared in North Carolina, with some areas recording as much as 0.5 meters of snow over the weekend. A search is underway for a driver whose vehicle was found in a river. Meanwhile, thousands of flights were also cancelled across the region. The snowstorm was expected to move off the coast on Monday, although the National Weather Service warned it would continue to be a dangerous system. State police said that almost 60 crashes were recorded, with the number rising to 500 in North Carolina between midnight and 11 a.m. local time on Sunday. And moving on to the latest update from French President Emmanuel Macron for his silence in public over the violence in Paris, with opponents accusing him of returning the Élysée Palace into a bunker. Ministers hope his address will placate the Yellow Vest, whose revolt poses the most formidable challenge to his 18-month administration to date.
Up next is business news.
Last year is still a previous period when it was largely an oil sector-driven performance.
And on the activities of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, the markets closed on a negative note in the new week as the consumer goods sector recorded a massive drop, with the all-share index plunging downwards by 0.82 basis points to close at 30,614.73. Equity capitalization dipped to 11.176 trillion naira and total deals stood at 3,193. Leading the list of top gainers was Forte Oil, which gained 1 naira 15 kobo, a 6.39% rise from its last share price close. Okumu Oil also gained 1 naira, a 1.39% rise from its previous close. Nestle shared a whooping 64 naira from its last share price close, while Mobil recorded a 14 naira 80 kobo loss. Diamond Bank led the list of top trades as it recorded a volume of 44.920 million shares, valued at 45.596 million naira. And on sectorial indices, NSE Insurance traded negative as it dropped by 0.74%. NSE Oil and Gas dropped by 1.19%, NSE Banking dropped by 0.39%, NSE Consumer Goods dropped by 2.32%, and NSE Industrial also dropped by 0.25%. And that's all on business news on this hour. Still ahead on Plus TV Africa is our roundup on entertainment and sports. We'll be back in a moment.
In entertainment, according to Nigerian singer Timaya, regardless of background and social class, anyone can attain success. He gave an emotional speech at the just concluded Hennessy Artistry, asking the youth to stay true to their goals and remain passionate. The singer further used himself as a point of reference, stating that if a plantain seller like him can attain success, then success is attainable by anyone. Timaya also used the platform to thank all of his fans as he attributed his success to their continuous support over the years. Still on entertainment, Panda singer Designer, while performing in Kenya, was lifted up by fans during a stage performance. However, in a twist of events, the rapper raised an alarm after the fans robbed him of his sneakers and a sock in the process. He didn't seem to mind though, as he carried on with his performance with just one sock. And that's it on entertainment. I'm Tokumbo Taiwo, and the best in sports coming up right after this.
In the conclusion of investigations into alleged Tuesday's UEFA Champions League clash against Barcelona having been left out of sports travel to Spain. Both right-backs have been struggling with groin injuries. Kyle Walker-Peters, who signed a new 5-year deal with the club on Monday, is expected to start at right-back against Barcelona, while Eric Lamela, who suffered thigh injury weeks back, has recovered fully and is available for selection. With Barcelona already through and guaranteed top spot of the group, Tottenham Hotspur need to match Inter Milan's results against PSV Eindhoven to stand a chance of qualifying for the knockout stages of the UEFA Champions League. And that's it on Sports Updates. I'm Samson Oloide.
Well, that's our news roundup of events at this hour. For more news and updates, please follow us at Plus TV Africa on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And do subscribe to our YouTube page at Plus TV Africa. We're on channel 308 on Star Times. We'll be back later with more stories making the headlines. Do join us again. I am Ife Arono. Have a nice time.
That is how we get looped into a cycle of insanity, repeating the same thing and expecting a different result. That cycle of failure is unsustainable and it has to end now.
Perfection Train is back.
They take us to the bush and start asking us to call our people to send money.
What can be done as an intervention for them right now to stop abuse of all children?
We're looking at a situation where that part of the brain that sends motor signals to parts of the body that need to move your muscles is damaged. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's totally dead, which is why you find people affected in the various ways, but it just means that the individual is unable to control optimally the movements of his or her muscles.
It's a disorder that affects the movement, the posture, or the tone of an individual, usually as a result of a damage or an injury that's been done to a developing immature brain. Usually it would occur before, some occurs before birth, while the baby is still in the womb, where for some others it occurs around birth. Standard definition usually covers the time of the birth, the time of the child being, how flexible that child or the group of muscles is in that child. So it depends on the extent of the damage, that will also determine the extent of the symptoms you will see in that child as regards movement, posture, and tone. For most cerebral palsies, we don't get to diagnose them until the child is an infant. The infant that's between delivery to about 1 year old, and for some preschool, because that's where you get to start seeing the signs and the symptoms of them. If you have a child before the age of 1 that is predominant, already has a preference of what handedness they're going to be, that could be a red flag. Ideally, most children start to choose what hand they decide to use above 1 year. So if you have an infant who already decides, who's already choosing, who's preferring to use one side of the body over the other, that gives you a red flag that this child could have cerebral palsy.
The concept of cerebral palsy is wrapped in mystery, so to speak, as not so much is still known about the condition.
What causes cerebral palsy? There could be genetic abnormality in the development of this brain. So for the child, there is no injury, so to speak, from the outside. It is just a dysfunction in the genetic makeup of the development of the brain. So the child is born with that defect already, and then there's a problem with the muscle tone, with the rigidity, with the posture. While for some others, cases lead to a malfunction in the development of that child, in the brain of that child, delay in the delivery of oxygen in that during the resuscitation of the child, or the separation of the child from the mother, or during the delivery. It depends, for example, when the child is not well positioned and coming out during the delivery process, that could lead to a delay or a disruption in the flow of oxygen to that brain, and then we could have a damage to the brain. For some babies also, the pregnancy was fine, there was no genetic problem, and then delivery also fine. Then they get infected either by meningitis, by bacteria that cause meningitis or encephalitis. Meningitis is an infection that affects the covering of the brain, or encephalitis is an infection that infects the brain substance. That also could lead to a damage to that brain because it's still developing, and then the aftermath is same as cerebral palsy, affecting the posture, the movements of that child.
This condition is not contagious, it is not infectious, and it has no cure.
Once we accept our limits, we go beyond them is a popular saying of Albert Einstein. Same is the story of Tobiloba Ajayi, a Nigerian lawyer called to bar at 23, a solicitor, an author, and advocate living with cerebral palsy. Toby's life exemplifies the possibility for every child with disability to achieve their life's dreams and biggest goals.
I like to say that I'm a disability management advocate with a special focus on inclusive education for children with cerebral palsy. And people ask me, like, why cerebral palsy? And I always say, well, the answer is pretty simple. It's because I live with cerebral palsy myself. When I was about 3, I got enrolled into the educational system. I went through primary school. I actually went through the Gifted Children's Program, which is like for the really smart kids. Yeah. And in 2011, I went off to get a master's in international law. And in the process, I wrote my first book, then wrote 2 more books after that. So I'm a 3-time published author. And then in 2016, I got on the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders. And I did get on the Yali Network for West African Leaders in 2015. And then I did get on the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders in 2016.
Cerebral palsy is a disorder of movement and posture. It is a medical condition, but there are myths around it.
What we do not understand, we will stigmatize. Because it's just cultural. And I think it's just human nature. If we don't understand something, we have to find a way to explain it. So it's either we make it a stigma issue, we make it a religious issue, we make it a demonic issue. A parent reached out to me earlier this week and said they are calling her child a snake. And I was just like, oh gosh, here we go.
And government have no adequate provisions to care for people with this condition as yet.
Our government does not have a working policy as to the management of people with disabilities generally. Now, do we have written policies? Yes, Lagos State has. It has not been passed yet. But even the state laws that have been passed can be enforced better, can be implemented better, but they are not.
Like Toby, Bisola is raising a child with same condition and, of course, not without the challenges and issues of stigmatization.
I've had issue with my families, saying, okay, you're the only one in this family that has given birth to a child with disability. People will tell you that it's your sin, or it's the sin of your forefathers that you are bearing. People would, come at you. They practically attack you. You can't take your child with disability out without having a stare. People stare at you like, why are you bringing this child out? This child, you should just go and lock him up. There are people that would advise you that, you can actually get medical assistance to terminate his life, have him killed and all that. school environment is an environment where everybody comes to, where children actually learn socialization. And that is his first contact to experiencing the real world. And I discovered that they would put him in a dark corner in the school and lock the room. I go to work, I come back, where's my son, where's my son? They would go to the corner and bring him out. So I observed over a period of time, and I realized that, no, this isn't what I'm looking for. People say a lot, and it can be painful, especially the persons that are the closest to you, when they look at your son and then they say, okay, where do you get this one from? What kind of thing is this? Abirun, Obanje, all these words. Or they even make gesture of the kind of child that you've given birth to.
Helen Obiageli Oshikoya, child development clinician, has identified a gap in our society.
There's actually a school health policy of 2006, which is endorsed by UNICEF, which actually says that children should be tested, physically and mentally before going into school and subsequent to when they're actually in school. So this system allows us to create an inclusive educational system. It doesn't matter if the child actually does have a disability, the child should be given the opportunity to actually go into school.
Every child, not just cerebral palsy children, every child can learn special education. And we must also look at inclusive education. But to have proper inclusion, we must prepare the child for inclusion. We must sort out the children in special education to see that, yes, they have reached a level of what we call independent living, and they have also shows a level of intellectual acuity, which means they can fit into a normal class. Then we now have to make sure that even the class, those are the students and the teachers, are prepared to accept this strange-looking person.
I do appreciate the fact that because parents don't understand things, the tendency is that they are afraid of things. So what we try to do is that subsequent to before the screening starts in that school, we have like a parent workshop whereby we can educate the parents, make them understand it is a policy, and make them understand that the screening might not apply to your child, but there are children that have issues and the parents don't know how to go about it and are, quote unquote, in denial.
Option as a right, not as the exception that currently exists in our society. Benga Ayodada has a brother with cerebral palsy. He shares the vital role of siblings in supporting a family member living with the condition.
When we got to know, we became more tolerant of him because there's some things that we did, the reaction to him, and those things that I did were because of his condition. But now that we knew better that it's not his fault, we learned to empathize with him. Like help him when he's walking, he's stumbling or he's wobbling, we quickly step in and help him. All of those things, we're still giving him tough love, but we became more tolerant of his excesses.
Tobiloba is someone you want to know for her abilities and not her disability.
She's a talker, as you may already know. So it was easy to look beyond that. She could do a lot of things herself. She was in the hostel for the 3 years she spent in my school, SS1 to 3. She has definitely beaten all the odds that I think most people face.
In the end, disability is a matter of perception. If you can do one thing well, you are needed by someone, and the world needs more people standing tall above disability.
first point of accountability is asking questions.
Hello and welcome to Plus Sports and Plus TV Africa. I am Udoka Njoko.
Hi everyone, welcome to Plus Training.
You cannot continue to recycle poverty while you're spending a lot of money on unproductive ventures.
The government has to feel the impact.
Honorable Commissioner, sir, welcome to the show.
Number one, where are you?
For these children who once lived in the largest prison in Lusaka, education is a luxury, and Faith Masupa has made it possible for them.
Yes, this is a green one. How many dogs are here? One. No.
A few years ago, she founded an organization called Mother of Millions. It looks after women prisoners and their babies in Zambia's capital and helps them adjust to the world outside after their release.
The only thing that Mother of Millions wants to do is to ensure that the women get training and are able to stand by themselves, independent in the community, because sometimes it's hard to reintegrate into community or society, you know, because of the stigma that goes with it.
Mother of Millions is supported by donations. The organization is often short on cash, so classes for the children are usually held in Faith's home. Faith then drives the mothers to a training center. The ride takes them past the city's central prison, which houses over 1,000 inmates, men, women, even children.
When I was pregnant with my son, I decided to pass through the prison on my left, and I was shocked to find children in prison. The conditions of these children were pathetic. Children were subject to the same portions as their mother. They were sleeping in cells like their mother, and they were treated as prisoners, and today they are called circumstantial children. We decided to make a difference by creating a classroom and impacting the lives of these children.
Classes continue after the women are released from prison. Mothers learn how to run small businesses so they can generate a source of income.
These are questions. Implementation is to differentiate. We're trying all the best to ensure that they get an education in literacy, learning, and business skills. And by so doing, they are able to stand independently on themselves.
Faith often has to teach the children the most basic skills. 4-year-old Joseph is on his first excursion after life in prison. There's much to discover. Faith is nearby, keeping a watchful eye.
This is the first time Joseph has been in such an open place, such a place where he can feel like a child again. And that's his right. I think he's enjoying what is happening to him. I'm happy for him.
Joseph now enjoys his freedom. But for the many other children still living in Zambia's prisons, Faith Masupa plans to build the first school behind prison walls in Zambia.
Just my weight brings this in alone.
The youth comes to the fore.
We haven't fared better than the white man did while he was running the system. And some people are questioning, does that have anything to do with the black man's lack of capacity to run a proper system? Are we beginning to convince ourselves that the white man does a better job, especially when it comes to running an education system? The answer may be yes and no. And I can confirm that, yes, in many respects they did better. But in some respects, we have also done better because we have captured some of our needs better than they did. But when it comes to supervising the system to ensure that the money we are spending on the system gives us the result we are looking for, I'm not sure we have lived up to expectation. And when it comes to the quality of the products, that we are getting out of the system, we are very far away from where we should be.
We are at the lowest ebb. If you look at the educational system that we inherited from our colonial masters, it was a little better. And we continue talking about the old good days when Nigerian graduates can compete globally. That is not the case today. We have situation in Nigeria today where most of our graduates are unemployable.
What needs to change?
The first thing to do is to review the philosophy of education. In doing that, we need to go back to the national policy on education. The country, as we speak, has one of the best national policy on education in terms of its egalitarian nature, in terms of its objectives to make education a public good. Unfortunately, this policy is often implemented in breach. So the first thing is to re-excavate that policy, look at it, in its holistic manner, and then begin its implementation faithfully.
Nigeria's first National Curriculum Conference held in 1969. A review of the recommendations of that conference in 1973 resulted in the publication of the National Policy on Education in 1977, which went on to have a second, third, and fourth editions published in 1981, 1998, and 2004, respectively. The MPE provides that learners at all levels of education achieve permanent literacy, numeracy, and effective citizenship. But whose responsibility is it to push for a change in the narrative?
If we desire development, then relevant agencies in the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Education, Teachers Registration Council, National Universities Commission, etc. These are the people who are constitutionally saddled with the responsibility of developing education. Once they take the lead, then civil society groups, education institutions like ours, can also then join in that movement in ensuring that education works, for the people of this country.
While relevant agencies have their role to play, many youths believe efforts to make any lasting...
I'll change the curriculum in the sense that I'll change it for it to be relevant.
I don't put close to those they are teaching. So if they don't allow them to structure it in such a way that students will be able to gain from it, things will not be in place. And these things might even teach students the wrong thing, which might affect them in society.
Revisit the curriculum of education in Nigeria. You scrap out where % of the national budget is being allocated to education. Yeah, I think that's really small. I think we can start.
Make conscious efforts to address the problem of funding, to address the problem of manpower deficit, to address the problem of poor quality of students that are admitted into universities, and then see how we can address the distractions that come with globalization, particularly the internet. Some students are addicted to the internet that they cannot live normal lives.
Also speaking on the current strike action by organized labor over the increase in minimum wage, Dr. Ashiru is of the opinion that labor should move the struggle further.
What we need in this country, and that's my recommendation to labor, is to move the struggle a little bit further for a redistribution of the wealth of this country. A situation where you have a large number of people who don't have and a few people who have and care less about the majority. Such a society can never develop.
He firmly believes that the nation's minimum wage should be increased from the current 18,000 naira.
They should reconvene the tripartite committee on minimum wage. Agree, and in the principle of collective bargaining, labor